friends, Brickey here, as promised. Gonna do a little walk through the evolution of a dream exhibit here at the Disneyland Opera House and do what I promised. Break down some of this concept artwork, some of the original maps of Disneyland, and just overall nerd out on some great historic and rare Disney design. Let's jump in. The Disney Gallery presents Disneyland 70, Evolution of a Dream, featuring rarely seen artwork from the vaults of Disney. And check out that little D70 logo. It's pretty good. So the exhibit starts with old, concept artwork of Disneyland maps. I'll break down why the Herb Ryman cute story isn't accurate, and there were many, many other ideas before the Lost Weekend. And people argue with me all the time, no, that was the way that it went. And it's like, yeah, that's the way they told the story, because Disney magic. So we actually start out the exhibit looking at the ideas to build Mickey Mouse Park outside of Walt Disney Studios up in Burbank. So this is the Riverside Drive site plan. It's the earliest spark of Disneyland, drawn by Harper Goff in '51, and explores a park along Riverside Drive in Burbank. So this is '51, and there is already so much Disneyland inside of this one. We see a paddle wheeler. Obviously, a train is a central part of this overall design. But we also see the early ideas of how Disney will use paths to disorientate the guests to make a small plot of land feel way more adventurous than it is. For example, look at this little hub right here. And then again with this little teardrop of land right here, using a small amount of land wrapped around by a railroad track to maximize the guest experience. And yes, Walt wanted a circus. Everybody talked him out of it. He even built one here at Disneyland. It was a complete disaster. But my man wanted a circus. But that beautiful illustration doesn't indicate where you start the journey. You first have to map it all out. Get what I did there? And sort of figure out, how do you want to cut up the parcel of land before you actually do the fantasy version. This is the Riverside Drive expanded, also drawn by Harper Goff in 1951. This layout expands the idea of a park along Riverside Drive in Burbank, California. So this one already has a strong indication of a Rivers of America and a Tom Sawyer Island, as well as, again, there's that centralized hub design, spokes, letting people pick their own adventure, making it feel adventurous, but don't let them get lost. A little frontier village, and that appears to be an early rendering of the storybook canal boat type experience. And also, Walt still wanted that circus. This black and white version down here, sketch layout of Disneyland, this one gives a little bit more of ideas of different focal points, such as an opera house, an exhibit hall, a cafe, general store. But look at the way that they're disorienting guests. This is already an early indication from people that you can see that work in Hollywood. How do we take a small amount of land and maximize it on adventure? Well, by making you feel like every turn gives you a different offering. Look at that. Pinocchio attraction, a carousel, a Cinderella palace. Basically like a little floating fantasy land that you could only get to from this little tower bridge. An old mill. We saw Disney go on to build a couple of those. Another easy to overlook but important detail is everybody that Walt talked to that already owned an amusement park told him, do not build the berm. And we already see on the studio park a row of trees hiding the railroad, so guests would feel like they were inside of this theme park and not in Burbank, California. So many of the early ideas were there at the very beginning. They just needed to be massaged into the perfect layout. Walt Disney soon realized the Riverside Drive location was not large enough. So as his team scouted potential sites across Southern California, Marvin Davis sketched these layout ideas in 1953, before the location had even been chosen. So it makes sense that these illustrations were done by Marvin Davis before they knew their location, because they're pretty rectangle, right? They're just trying to make something that will fit into almost any space that they would end up discovering for the home of Disneyland. But when we look at the 1953 version, it is way more rigid, way more dense than the earlier loosey-goosey 1951 versions for the backlot at the Walt Disney Studios. This starts to indicate that this is no longer a small little hobby park. This is a full-fledged enterprise. I wonder what the idea was for this residential street with different little homes coming off this cul-de-sac. Here's the theater. Obviously, the idea of a Rivers of America type vibe still exists. A Storybook Land canal boats type of attraction is still on the board, as well as a Granny's Farm area with looks like a stagecoach road going around it. And you can see they're kind of just massaging the layout. This one has the body of water on the southern edge, where this one has the body of water over on the eastern edge. Just working time and time again to try to find that perfect layout. First Anaheim site plan, created in August of '53 by Marvin Davis. This was the first layout designed specifically to be chosen in the Anaheim property. Now we're seeing something that is even more structured. And if you look, that idea of the hub is still around. This seems to be an early idea of a Fantasyland type area with the carousel, kiddie rides, and looky here. This looks to be the early idea of Chicken of the Sea. It also has guests entering through a tunnel with a centralized train station coming into a town square. And look at that, 4 main buildings making up a Main Street USA. But this one shows potentially an inner courtyard. So the Emporium would be sort of a marketplace. Let's backtrack on an idea real quick. Hub here in the dead center of this park. Hub here in the lower corner. Hub here, dead center. Back to the origins, hub, much smaller and not so grandiose. The original site map for Burbank has a very small hub, and then the second version of that has a small hub, but has a lot more that's around it. So this is just one of those moments in creativity where you know you have an idea, but you don't know the perfect positioning for it until you just keep trying it over and over again. This is the rotated site plan with southern entrance, a new orientation drawn by Marvin Davis in September of 1953, placing the Main Street entrance at the south end and shaping how guests would eventually approach the park. So this is 1953, and they are very much now grounded in reality. This layout isn't too far off from what would happen. It's a rough sketch. There's plenty that's off, but enough that's kind of close. It's oriented right. It has a main street that leads into the hub. It has a Rivers of America in its proper location. This one's starting to feel close to home. We have the advent of Fantasyland on the northern border, but check this out. A little argument I've gotten into with people before where I said originally that the Jungle Cruise in Adventureland was going to be on the eastern end of the park. But once Walt Disney realized how hard it was to run the water, they moved it over to here so that Adventureland and the Jungle Cruise could be in the same dark water system as the Rivers of America. I've had people tell me that I was a full-on liar for saying this. Some people really do believe the Herb Ryman fairy tale. And why wouldn't they? Disney's been capable of doing so many magical things that sometimes a fictional tale is exactly what your heart wants to believe. Still in September of '53, this is the investor presentation plan. This version was completed in September 12th, 1953, so 5 days after the last one we looked at, and was included in the proposal that Roy Disney pitched to potential Disneyland backers. So it basically looks like they toned down some of the things that they couldn't quite do, but we still see Adventureland over to the east, Rivers of America to the far west. But in this version, it leads over to some sort of lake. But we do indeed have a railroad station, dead centered, tunnel to the left, tunnel to the right, taking you up a main street that does have a cross street or a center street to the hub, Fantasyland still to the north, Frontierland to the west, and a Land of Tomorrow to the east. Now this backstage area here would end up living up in here. But everybody knows that when you see an apartment and you're laying in bed daydreaming about how you're going to decorate your new apartment, you tend to imagine more space than what was actually there. Site plan from the famous Herb Ryman, Lost Weekend. This is drawn by Marvin Davis in September of 1953. The same weekend, Herb Ryman and Walt Disney together created the famous overall bird's eye pencil drawing of Disneyland. This plan appears in the bottom corner of the legendary sketch. So this is the detailed version in the bottom right. All right, let's break down the Lost Weekend myth. So I think the way that most people want to believe this Lost Weekend is that Walt sat behind Herb Ryman, looking over his shoulder, basically future casting everything that he wanted. Basically giving Herb Ryman his vision, and Herb turned the dream into reality by sketching it down on a piece of paper. That's a beautiful story. But there was an actual blueprint that they were following. So Herb could look at the hub and go, what do you think the hub's gonna look like, Walt? Walt could tell him what the hub was gonna look like, but Herb knew exactly where it was at. It wasn't like he was just making it up on the fly. He was just making a fantastical illustration based off of this sketch, this overall site plan that was grounded in reality. So as a lot of things move through time, there's a half truth and a half lie. And somewhere in the middle is where that fantastical story lies. The one that we want to believe in our hearts because it sounds amazing. These two talented men spending a weekend together, eating bad food, ripping cigs, and just trying to get it done, right? Like, I have no doubt that they were up on crazy deadlines and had to pull a long weekend. Like, every creative knows exactly what that's like. I have one this weekend myself. But the idea that they were making it up on the spot, on the fly, that part, a little over exaggerated. I'm sure there was a lot of, what do you want this to look like? How do you want this to feel? A little side pencil sketch. Is this too tall? Is this too dramatic? That looks good. Now put it over on the main body of work. Like, I'm sure there was a ton of that. There's no doubt it was a collaboration. But the idea that it was all just made up that weekend, that part, not so true. Especially when we walk through this timeline of greatness. So many of these ideas Walt had in his imagination and had other people reinterpret them time and time again. Before they got to that moment, there was so much that had been done that was just like the Hail Mary to get the idea across the line. Not everything in there was accurate, as we all know. Let's take the Rivers of America, for example. Again, this is an idea that goes back to the origins of Walt's plan. But this really does show how even though you have a great concept, you have to rework it time and time again. And every time that you illustrate it, you see what's the relationship between the rivers of America and what borders it? How do we use this in a way that benefits every component around it? And the only way you understand what that perfect symbiotic relationship is through trial and error. Which means you have to kind of keep putting it in different spots, putting different, how you doing? And putting different neighbors around it before you find that perfect blend. Things like this don't happen on the first attempt. And I think that's something that we could all learn from. Everybody wants success today, not tomorrow. And it's not even tomorrow that you find it. Sometimes it's months or years away. But you keep drawing it, you keep placing it, and you keep figuring out what works the best, and hopefully you get to where you want to go. This is a perfect example of every artist's career of trying time and time again until finally it feels just right. I don't know if this video was successful in its purpose. It's really, really hard to film these things with all the glare and you know, like I'm not on a ladder, so I can't get it perfectly dead set. But if you enjoyed looking at all the maps and where it went through, I will do more of this. I just don't know how hard this is going to be to edit, and I don't know how successful it will be as storytelling. So as always, it's kind of a different video for the channel. Your comments below will let me know. Did it work? You know, did I go too fast? Did I go too slow? What do you want more of? But let me know. I want to take advantage of this exhibit being here as much as possible because it is just like an embarrassment of riches. So thank you so much for showing up for a different type of video. There's people over there right now, and I want to share it and not be rude. So I appreciate you showing up, and hopefully you walked away from this having a greater appreciation for the Lost Weekend, for Walt's vision, but also the creative process. I came into all this already as a professional artist, and when I stood on Main Street, I was just like, this is the most beautiful art installation I've ever been in. I'm also a little bit emotional because I just met a very, very nice gentleman who's here. He comes here every year when he gets his cancer-free scan, and that feels so much bigger than this. So thank you, sir, for coming up and speaking to me. No, it's not easy for you to speak, and it meant the word to me that you use some of your words on me and my little channel. So thank you. Sorry about that. I have somebody who's very close to me who's going through very similar stuff, and I just had the nicest guy in the world come up to me and speak to me, and I've met a ton of amazing people here today. I always do, but every now and again you just meet somebody that has a story that just like reminds you of why we all love this place. And the Walt Disney stuff always makes me emotional, and then meeting somebody with a very beautiful Disneyland story, I don't know, just reminds me why I got into all this in the first place. And yes, when Beth is away is when I totally start to fall apart. So it's just, it's been a wild time in our family's history right now, and meeting that gentleman just like was just exactly who I needed to meet today and what I needed to do. So sorry for the weird ending to the video. Was not planning on that, but that's how the magic moments are. You never see them creeping up on you. That's why they're magic. All right, just met another amazing family who was so nice to me. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. My heart is full. Sorry. My heart is full, and I just want to hold on to this moment. There's so many amazing people that love this place. And the fact that so many of them have found a home with the content I make really means the world to me. Because I almost quit because I thought that nobody cares. And oh, have I learned in the last year, people care. And God, that means the world to me. All right, weirdest ending to a video ever. He like cries. I'm cool. He cries again. Thanks for showing up. What a disaster. Bye, everybody.